Hey everyone, welcome to the Pawareness podcast, and thanks for joining me. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube, and also check us out at pawareness.org and on Instagram at pawareness_official. On Instagram, we are doing submissions for Pet of the Week, where you can submit your foster pet, and we'll pick one winner every month, and we'll give $200 to their choice of charity or foster. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Pawareness podcast. Today, I'm bringing on Jayne Sage, board president of the Street Cat Hub. Thank you so much for joining us, and I want to go ahead and let you introduce yourself and what it is that Street Cat Hub does.
Great, thank you. We are a trap, neuter, return program. The organization itself was founded in 2014, and it was a follow-up to Best Friends came in and did a pilot program here for 3 years from 2012 through 2014 with the expectation that the city of Albuquerque would take over on the trap, neuter, return after they got us jump started, which was an incredible jump start and an incredible partnership. Then at that point, I formed Street Cat Hub to continue that program. And that program was initiated with the city shelter. So it's a shelter-based TNR program. So we're doing all of the shelter returns when feral cats are taken in. And then we're also following up with going out into the field and trapping the neighborhoods where those cats are coming from.
And you mentioned that you're in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And what's the vicinity on that like? And follow up on to that, what are some kind of the issues that you guys are facing in the New Mexico area?
Well, I think that Albuquerque itself within city limits is pretty typical of most of the sort of southern cities where we don't have a very harsh winter, so we don't get much of a break from kitten season. We have probably 3 or 4 months where we can kind of trap without a whole lot of issues from like September through January. And then so most of the kittens that are born in the winter will still survive. Our winters are pretty mild here. It's a pretty urban environment in city limits, but we also work outside of city limits in the county and some of the other areas. So we do get into some more rural areas and farmland and, barn cat situations also.
Interesting. Yeah. And what you mentioned that there is a break for kitten season, and that's because there isn't much of a break, and that's because of the weather, correct?
Yeah, it seems like we get that. There's a few months in there where we just don't see cats in heat. Very, very few nursing cats. Usually if they are nursing, they probably are indoor, outdoor, and we don't have to deal with the pregnancy issue with a lot of the clients either. So that's kind of my favorite time of the year to trap is that, late winter, early spring. And then we trap pretty hard right up until April 1st is when most of our kittens are born. So at this point, the majority of our kittens have been born.
And you mentioned that this isn't just a TNR program, it's TNR with a shelter, right? So I've spoken with several, I've spoken with several TNR programs, and they're just TNR by themselves. They don't really have the rescue component. What does that look like in terms of how does that change things, and how many cats can you guys house, I guess, at one given time?
We probably can do. We've handled between 6, probably 80 is probably the maximum, but we probably don't hit that very often. We have a facility outside of the shelter. So even though we're tied to the shelter, we have our own storefront, and we're actually getting ready to get our own clinic up and running again also. The shelter, one of the best things about working directly with the shelter is it's really easy to find the cats. It's like all of their calls to 311 get referred to us. Anything with a free roaming cat, we talk to them, we evaluate the situation, try to find out if it's an owned cat situation or if it is, a feral or unowned cat situation that we should be helping with. The shelter does provide some adoption space. We always try to get rescue groups to take our tame cats and kittens before they go to the shelter, but our shelter is also an incredible partner. They they have reached a no-kill status, and we feel very comfortable with taking tame cats and kittens there. It's just we try not to any more than we have to. Last year, partly due to COVID, we did build a really big adoption program, also foster and adoption program, which now that the other groups are kind of back up and running, we're going to back off of that, mainly because we're the only ones that can do the TNR part of it, and the adoption and foster part of it can be so time consuming and expensive. And so we're going to try to farm most of that out. The one thing we try to handle is if we have feral moms with kittens, we will take some of those in, just because a lot of other rescue groups aren't comfortable with ferals, and we don't like handing those off to the city either. But the city partnership is huge, because we've got their support, we've got the officers backing us. Fluctuates a little depending on the management who's in there. We've had good times and bad times with that, but overall that relationship is excellent.
That's great. And yeah, partnerships are huge. And how long was it into when you guys started to where you really started working on those partnerships? Was that immediately, or did that take some time to kind of develop?
That was something Best Friends developed by definition of them coming here. They chose us in San Antonio as those two initial programs. And they required that be tied to the shelter, and they required the shelter cooperation. So
that's cool.
So they got into it. And a lot of the programs are shelter based, where they actually come from the shelter, and the shelter clinics are doing the surgery, and the cats are still coming through the shelter. But ours has gotten where we're pretty much just subcontracted. We try to keep the cats out of the shelter as much as possible. They try to encourage people not to bring feral cats to the shelter. Citizens can, and we can still pick them up from the shelter. They usually fix them for us, and then we'll do the returns. But we try to avoid that, just so the cats aren't tied up in a 3-day hold, or just the exposure to, the issues at the shelter. So.
Okay. And I know that you kind of touched on this, and you mentioned during, COVID, and I know that for, dog rescues were the shelters were empty, right? Was it the same with cats? Were as many people adopting cats during that time frame? Or did you not really see that as much?
It was, yeah. We were able to do a lot of adoptions. I think our shelter did empty out. A lot of people were at home and willing to foster, and a lot of people were looking to bring, cats into their homes during that time. So since we didn't always have clinics that were open where we could do the TNR surgeries, we kind of shifted and focused on those fosters and getting those kittens ready for adoption. And I mean, it went really well. I mean, we've had a few returns off of it, but I don't think any more than normal. So.
Okay. That's good to know. And I'm interested too, from your perspective, from what you've seen in your time, what do you think? Do you see some common misconceptions when it comes to stray cats or anything along those lines? Or just maybe some problem issues that just.
I think the most common misconception is by the feeders themselves, who, they're feeding the cats are coming right up to them. Sometimes they can pet them while they're eating, and they might even get really friendly with that feeder. And probably the most common misconception is just that, I've got this cat tame, can we get it into a home? And, where it really is just, it's still a feral cat. It's only tamed to that feeder, and it's not going to do well in a cage situation. It just takes a lot of work to get a cat from that stage to where it's comfortable moving inside and moving into an actual home. So I think just that expectation that, we're going to be able to find nice homes for all of them, and just kind of, informing people that they're really better off going back, where sometimes the resources just aren't there to find them homes at that time. And once we get into July, August, and things, the kittens start to back up again, it's just, you just don't want to be pulling as many of the cats, that are shy out of the field. But in the winter, when we can, we try to do it as much as possible.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about, I'm curious too, right? With the people that adopt cats, maybe some people already have a cat, and and this is me, right? I have one cat. And do you have any advice for someone who might have one cat, but they're thinking about adopting another cat? Do you have any advice or help when it comes to that issue?
Yeah, I'm not the best person to answer that because I'm not on the front end of adoptions. I know a lot of times if we're doing kittens, we try to adopt two at the same time. So
Nice.
probably if you have an adult cat and the adult cat is kind of past that playful stage, it might be a good idea to bring, if you're going to bring a kitten in, it might be good to just bring it a playmate also, and they'll kind of keep themselves entertained and kind of leave that open for the adult whether they want to join in on that or not, rather than forcing them to engage with a kitten. But
Yeah, that's kind of been my thing. I've just been trying to think, how to do that, but I'll keep asking and trying to figure that out with my cat.
yeah, I think the two female thing is probably the most unlikely combination to work. So if you've got a female, probably a male is the better bet. But two males usually can work it out.
Okay. All right. I'll keep that in mind. And what about what are some things that you guys are working on at Street Cat Hub that you're excited about, or maybe not even going into this year, but the following year? What are some things that you guys are working on over there?
We're really trying to get more community outreach, especially coming, hopefully out of the pandemic situation. We want people coming into our facility as soon as that's reasonable. We want people coming in and seeing what we do, and we want to engage people in doing their own trapping and using the traps themselves. But we also want to we want to get a second band going and really increase our volunteers and really get out in the field and work with people on the trapping so that they've got some assistance. So we try to get people to do as much of the trapping as possible. But if we have more people that can go out and get them started, then that we can kind of survey the situation too and see what kind of quirks there are and kind of talk people through it. But I'd say getting out into the field more.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that's just getting out, now that things are starting to open back up, just getting out, making those connections and, building that outreach, I think is important for any organization for sure.
Yeah. It's a lot of, we were able to do a lot. We weren't really kept from trapping very much during this. It was more just whether we had clinics open to do the surgeries or not. So, it's just when you get out in the field, you see a lot more. The neighborhood sees the van, and you get a lot more people coming up to talk to you about their own cats and other cats that they're seeing.
And I saw that on the website, I believe is where I saw it. You guys service anywhere between 3,000 and 4,000 cats annually. And I think that's really impressive. And one of the things I wanted to ask you in particular was what are some things that you guys do well that has kind of allowed you to see some of the success you've seen, being in the space for, over half a decade? What are some things that you think you guys do really well?
Yeah, I think one of the most effective things we do, it's sort of a form of targeted trapping. Targeted trapping usually refers to staying in a particular zip code and focusing all your resources in one area before you move on to another area. But I look at it more as when you get into an area, like you've got somebody that's feeding the cats, to really try to get everything you can at that site while you're there. So, and that's where there's a big advantage to us being out there with that person, because if somebody's feeding and they think they're feeding 9 or 10 cats, and those are kind of, their cats, although they're not really their cats, but that's who they identify as their group. But then they leave dry food down all night. So, if we're out there and we're setting traps and staying out there for 2 or 3 days and really trying to clean up the area, we're real likely to walk out of there with double what they think they have. So, and it's those are the kinds of things that we might recognize if we're out there, where it's like, wow, these are all coming from the neighbor behind and to the right. It's like, I wonder if they put food down too, and sometimes we can identify a second feeder that might be interfering with the trapping and get traps set a second place. So it's really being very thorough and getting everybody all at once. And that's where, if we can get 15, 20 traps in there, instead of that resident picking up 2 traps from us and bringing 2 cats in at a time, it's much more effective as far as the cat's not learning the traps and developing a trap aversion, because it just kind of all happens very quickly. They're hungry, there's traps everywhere with food in, and it's a lot easier to get everybody.
Yeah, I really like that thoroughness, and kind of like the whole adage, I think it goes, the man who tries to catch two rabbits catches none. You're out here just super thorough, focused, and I think that's great advice. It makes sense. So
yeah, it really makes a big difference. And we might be in the same neighborhood the next year, and we remember that we were there, but we may have another colony that's backing right up to there. So, it might take a couple of years to get a whole area, that's real infiltrated to under control, but it does add up. And, there's a lot of places I drive by that I've just never heard from again, and other places you trap and you go back 2 years later and it's a completely different 20 cats. So I don't know what the difference is. But,
yeah. And sometimes
you get population control and sometimes you don't.
Yeah, and sometimes the long-term approach isn't bad too. It's just, that's great though. That's good to know. And I wanted to ask you too, where can people find you guys at? I know that you guys have an online presence. Where can they reach out if they want to help, support, volunteer possibly? What does that look like?
Yeah, streetcathub.org is our website, and we've got a place to donate there. We've got a place for volunteers, which can be in town or out of town. I think we have things that we can do remotely also. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. Probably Instagram is where we're most active. We've been dabbling with TikTok lately, so we've got some TikTok stuff. I imagine it would come up under Street Cat Hub. I'm not exactly sure what our handles are, but they should come up pretty readily under Street Cat Hub. But Instagram's probably the biggest one we're active on right now.
And I'll have all of those in the description below on whatever medium our guests are listening on. Feel free to check them out. Everything will be down there. Yeah, give these guys some likes. Definitely love what they're doing. Jayne, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot about trapping and just the whole situation in New Mexico. You're the first guest I've ever got to speak with that's been in New Mexico. So, and with your issues. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Great. Thank you for inviting me.